The restaurant was built to impress people who believed the world already belonged to them. Glass walls rose toward the night sky, reflecting city lights like trophies, and every table carried the quiet arrogance of wealth. No one expected violence there. No one expected fear. And no one expected that the moment everything went wrong would center around a man most people never looked at twice. For men moved at once, their confidence sharpened by entitlement, their anger fueled by something deeper than alcohol. Their target was not supposed to fight back. He was supposed to apologize, retreat, and disappear. But in the middle of that chaos stood a black waiter, a single father, wearing a white jacket stained by long hours and unspoken disrespect. What happened next shattered reputations, exposed buried truths, and changed lives forever. Before the story continues, support the mission of Black Legacy. Like this video, share it, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful stories that matter. The restaurant occupied the highest floor of a newly constructed luxury tower, a place designed for executives, investors, and people who measure their worth in net value rather than character. Reservations were scarce. Prices were unforgiving, and the staff was trained to disappear into the background. Perfection was expected. Silence was enforced, and mistakes were punished swiftly. Among the staff was a man named Marcus Reed, though very few people ever bothered to learn his name. To most guests, he was simply a waiter, another uniform blending into polished marble and soft lighting. To management, he was dependable, quiet, and invisible in the way they preferred. To his son, he was everything. Marcus had learned long ago how to move through spaces that were never built for him. As a black single father raising an 8-year-old boy, survival had shaped every choice he made. He worked double shifts whenever possible, took on extra responsibilities without complaint, and endured subtle humiliations that came with serving people who believed power gave them permission to belittle. His past was not written in weakness. Years earlier, Marcus had been on a different path, one marked by discipline and ambition. He had trained in corporate security, studied crisis management, and worked his way into a position that promised stability. But life had intervened with brutal efficiency. His partner had died unexpectedly, leaving him a child and a grief that did not fit neatly into office schedules or performance reviews. When layoffs followed a corporate merger, Marcus was one of the first to be let go. His qualifications meant little without connections, and his responsibilities left no room for extended unemployment. The restaurant job was supposed to be temporary. Temporary turned into years. On the night, everything changed. The dining room was filled with people accustomed to control. Among them sat a man known in business circles as Daniel Hawthorne, a billionaire CEO whose influence stretched across technology, finance, and real estate. His name carried weight, though few recognized his face. He preferred privacy, observing rather than commanding attention. That night, he had chosen the restaurant for a quiet dinner with associates, hoping to step outside the noise of his public life. The 4 men who would later attack him arrived together, loud in posture if not in voice. They wore tailored suits and confidence that came from inherited wealth and unchecked privilege. They spoke with the assurance of men who had never been denied entry, never questioned their authority, and never faced consequences that could not be negotiated away. From the moment they were seated, tension followed them. Their gestures were sharp, their laughter edged with mockery, and their eyes scanned the room not for beauty but for dominance. They treated the staff with thinly veiled contempt, issuing demands rather than requests, correcting imagined slights, and testing boundaries as if the evening were a game. Marcus noticed them immediately. Years of reading rooms had sharpened his instincts. He adjusted his posture, measured his responses, and ensured their table received flawless service. Experience had taught him that excellence was both shield and weapon, though it did not always protect against prejudice. As the night progressed, alcohol loosened the restraint these men barely maintained. Their attention shifted toward other guests, toward perceived rivals, toward anyone who dared to occupy the same space without deference. When their focus landed on Daniel Hawthorne, it was not recognition that sparked their interest, but something darker. They mistook his quiet demeanor for weakness. They misread his calm as submission. What began as subtle provocation escalated into open hostility. Chairs shifted. Voices rose just enough to carry. The atmosphere thickened with discomfort, and nearby diners grew uneasy, sensing that something was about to fracture the illusion of refinement. Marcus moved closer under the pretense of service. His awareness heightened. He had seen this before in different forms, in different places. Men who believed rules were optional. Men who confused entitlement with strength. He also knew how quickly situations like this could spiral, how fragile safety could become when pride and power collided. Management remained distant, hesitant to intervene where wealth was involved. The unspoken rule was clear. Do not upset influential guests, no matter the cost. Marcus understood the risk. He also understood the cost of doing nothing. The first shove came without warning, a sudden movement that shattered the controlled elegance of the room. Plates rattled, glasses tipped, and conversations died mid-sentence. The four men surrounded Daniel Hawthorne with predatory precision, their faces twisted by a sense of grievance that had nothing to do with the moment itself. They accused without evidence, postured without cause, and closed with a certainty that no one would stop them. To them, this was not violence. It was assertion, a demonstration of dominance in a world they believed existed for their benefit. Daniel did not raise his voice. He did not strike back. His restraint only seemed to inflame them further, as if calm itself were an insult. Chairs scraped across the marble floor as diners recoiled, fear spreading like a ripple through the room. Marcus felt the shift before it fully unfolded. His body responded faster than his thoughts, muscle memory resurfacing from years of training he had never expected to use again. But hesitation followed close behind. He was a waiter in a luxury restaurant, a black man in a room full of powerful people. Intervention carried risks beyond physical harm. It threatened his livelihood, his reputation, his ability to provide for his child. He saw his son's face in his mind, remembered the promise he had made to always come home safe. He also remembered the lessons he was teaching by example, lessons about dignity, courage, and the responsibility to act when something was wrong. The four men advanced, their movements growing more aggressive. One raised a fist. Another blocked any path of escape. The room held its breath. Marcus stepped forward. He did not shout. He did not posture. His presence alone disrupted the pattern, an unexpected variable in a situation built on assumptions. For a brief moment, the men hesitated, surprised that someone they considered beneath them would dare to interfere. That hesitation saved lives. Marcus positioned himself between Daniel and the attackers, his stance grounded, his awareness expansive. He anticipated movements, redirected momentum, and used space as a tool rather than brute force. His actions were precise, controlled, and measured, revealing a discipline that did not match his uniform. The men reacted with fury, their anger now doubled by humiliation. How dare a waiter, a black waiter, challenge them, their entitlement twisted into something uglier, fueled by racism that surfaced under pressure. Slurs were hurled, threats made, and violence escalated. Marcus absorbed blows meant for someone else, deflecting where possible, enduring where necessary. Each second stretched into an eternity as fear battled resolve. Nearby guests screamed. Some froze. Others fumbled for phones, torn between documenting the chaos and fleeing from it. Security was slow to respond, paralyzed by confusion and hierarchy. Management shouted orders that carried no authority. The illusion of control collapsed entirely. Through it all, Marcus remained focused. His movements were not reckless. He created distance, disrupted coordination, and prevented the attackers from gaining the advantage they sought. It was not heroics fueled by ego, but protection driven by principle. Eventually, the balance shifted. The men, unprepared for resistance and exposed by their own aggression, faltered. Security finally intervened, separating bodies, restraining arms, and restoring a semblance of order. The attackers were escorted out amid outrage and disbelief, their power stripped bare in the harsh light of consequence. Silence followed, heavy and disorienting. Marcus stood in the aftermath, breathing hard, his uniform torn, his body aching. He expected reprimand, termination, perhaps worse. He had broken the unspoken rules of his workplace by asserting his humanity. What he did not expect was the way Daniel Hawthorne looked at him. There was recognition in that gaze, not of status or wealth, but of character. Daniel had seen something rare that night, something money could not buy or command. He had seen courage rooted in responsibility, strength born of sacrifice. The room slowly returned to motion, but nothing felt the same. Guests whispered. Staff avoided eye contact. Management retreated into damage control. Marcus was escorted away, not to be praised, but to be questioned. In a quiet office, he explained what had happened, his voice steady despite the weight pressing down on him. He spoke of safety, of responsibility, of doing what he believed was right. There was no apology in his words, only honesty. The outcome remained uncertain. The following days unfolded with agonizing slowness. Marcus returned home bruised and exhausted, his son noticing the marks he tried to hide. He offered gentle explanations, careful not to burden the child with adult realities, yet aware that children understand more than they are given credit for. At work, whispers followed him. Some staff admired his bravery in silence, fearful of association. Others avoided him altogether, wary of management's response. He was temporarily suspended pending investigation, a procedural decision framed as neutrality but weighted with implication. News of the incident spread beyond the restaurant. Videos recorded by guests surfaced online, capturing fragments of chaos without context. Comment sections filled with speculation, bias, and debate. Some praised the waiter's actions. Others questioned his right to intervene. Racism seeped into the discourse, thinly veiled or overt, as it often did when black men disrupted narratives of submission. Daniel Hawthorne watched the footage privately, disturbed by how easily truth fractured under public scrutiny. He recognized the pattern, having seen it play out in boardrooms and courtrooms alike. Power shaped stories, and those without it were often rewritten into villains. He requested a meeting. When Marcus was called back to the restaurant, uncertainty knotted his stomach. He prepared for the worst, mentally rehearsing conversations about termination, legal consequences, and the sudden collapse of fragile stability. He did not expect to be led into a private dining room, where Daniel Hawthorne waited alone. The billionaire CEO spoke not with authority but with gravity, recounting the events as he had experienced them. He acknowledged the danger, the sacrifice, and the integrity Marcus had shown. He also acknowledged the systemic forces that made Marcus's position so precarious, forces Daniel himself had benefited from without always challenging. The conversation was not transactional. It was reflective, uncomfortable, and honest. Daniel revealed aspects of his own past, moments where he had remained silent when speaking up carried risk, times when comfort had outweighed conscience. He admitted that witnessing Marcus's actions forced him to confront those failures. What followed was not a grand gesture designed for headlines, but a series of deliberate choices. Daniel insisted the restaurant reinstate Marcus with full pay and public acknowledgement. When management hesitated, citing liability and reputation, Daniel withdrew his business and influence, making clear that complicity had a cost. The impact was immediate. Beyond the restaurant, Daniel leveraged his platform to address the incident publicly, framing it not as a scandal but as a mirror reflecting deeper societal issues. He spoke about racial bias, about how assumptions shape responses to violence, about the courage it takes for marginalized individuals to act in spaces that deny them protection. Marcus did not become a symbol by choice. He was thrust into visibility, his story dissected and debated. Interviews were requested, offers extended, and narratives constructed around him. Through it all, he remained grounded, prioritizing his son's well-being and his own sense of purpose. Opportunities emerged that aligned with his past and his values. Daniel offered him a position within his company's security and ethics division, a role that recognized Marcus's expertise and lived experience. It was not charity. It was respect. Accepting the offer meant change, risk, and stepping into a world that had once rejected him. It also meant stability, growth, and the chance to influence systems from within. Marcus accepted. The four men who initiated the violence faced legal consequences that could not be brushed aside. Their wealth shielded them less than they expected, their actions too public, their behavior too indefensible. Accountability, though imperfect, asserted itself. The climax of the story was not the fight itself, but the reckoning that followed. It was a moment when silence was broken, when power was challenged by principle, and when one man's decision to act reshaped the trajectories of many lives. Life did not become perfect in the aftermath. Marcus navigated new responsibilities, public attention, and the complexities of corporate culture with the same measured approach he had always used. Challenges remained both personal and systemic. Racism did not vanish because of one incident, nor did inequality dissolve under scrutiny. But something shifted. Marcus's son watched his father move through the world with quiet confidence, witnessing firsthand what it meant to stand up for others without losing oneself. The lessons were not delivered in speeches, but in actions, in consistency, and in the refusal to shrink. Within Daniel Hawthorne's company, policies were reevaluated, training implemented, and conversations encouraged that had long been avoided. Change was incremental and met with resistance, but it was real. The incident became a case study not in crisis management, but in moral responsibility. The restaurant, too, evolved. New leadership emphasized safety and equity, acknowledging past failures rather than burying them. Staff felt empowered to intervene when necessary, supported by clear protocols that valued human dignity over profit. Public discourse moved on, as it always did, but the ripples remained. For those who paid attention, Marcus's story challenged assumptions about heroism, power, and who is deemed worthy of protection. It asked uncomfortable questions about why his intervention was a prize in the first place, about how many acts of courage go unnoticed because they do not fit familiar narratives. The image of that night lingered in collective memory. A black waiter standing firm in a room full of wealth, refusing to step aside when injustice demanded confrontation. It was not the uniform that defined him, nor the titles others carried. It was his choice. The story's impact lay not in spectacle but in substance. It reminded viewers that change often begins in moments where personal risk collides with ethical clarity. It underscored that allyship is not passive approval but active participation, especially when silence feels safer. Most importantly, it affirmed that dignity is not granted by status. It is claimed through action. As the years passed, Marcus continued to work quietly, mentoring others, advocating for fairness, and raising his son with the same values that had guided him that night. Daniel continued to use his influence more intentionally, aware that awareness without action was another form of complicity. Their paths crossed occasionally, bound by shared experience rather than obligation. Neither sought credit. Both understood that the real measure that night was not what they gained, but what they refused to lose. In the end, the story belonged to everyone who watched, listened, and reflected. It belonged to those who recognized themselves in the silence of the crowd and those who saw possibility in the courage to step forward. And it asked a final question that lingered long after the screen went dark. When the moment comes, who will you choose to be? If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Like the video, share with others, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel Black Legacy for more powerful stories that challenge injustice and honor courage.